Good afternoon to you. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you up to date with the latest news from across the continent of Africa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuned in and watching us from. And we start our bulletin this afternoon from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The rebel group M23 has announced its withdrawal from a strategic military base that it captured in October 2022 in the Rumangabo area in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. In a statement, the group said it would hand over the camp on Thursday to the East African Regional Force. It follows the announcement last month of plans to withdraw from captured territories as a goodwill gesture in line with the agreements of a regional leaders summit in the Angolan capital Luanda in November. Residents in the Rutshuru region have been complaining of the group's slow withdrawal from at least 100 villages it captured since its offensive began last June. The handover of the Rumangabo military camp comes 12 days after the rebels withdrew from Kibumba, a town. A UN report leaked last month said that the Rwandan government had provided support to the M23 rebels. Rwanda has in the past denied these accusations. And then we head over to another troubled country, that is South Sudan. The governor of the Jonglei state has threatened to name people fueling violence between youth from the state and the neighboring Pibor administrative area. Dine Jagor said he knows those who are working hard to fuel the violence. However, he did not mention their names. The restive Greater Jonglei region has witnessed intercommunal violence for a week now. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, an estimated 30,000 people have been displaced following violent clashes in the area. OCHA said the violence has also led to cattle raiding, destruction of property, and displacement of thousands of people. It added that some 5,000 internally displaced people, including women and children, have arrived in Pibor town after fleeing the conflict areas of Gumuruk and Lekwangole. At least 56 people were reported killed and dozens were wounded in the days of escalating fighting in Gumuruk County. Speaking to the state-run TV SSBC last evening, Jonglei State Governor Dine called for peace and dialogue in the Greater Jonglei region. And still staying with South Sudan, the U.S. ambassador to South Sudan has reiterated his government's commitment to continue supporting the peace process in South Sudan. Michael Adler says the sub-national violence in the country is an obstacle to peace and development. According to United Nations report, sub-national violence in South Sudan remains the biggest insecurity threat since the signing of the revitalized peace agreement of 2018. South Sudan recently witnessed outbreaks of sub-national violence in the country, where tens of civilians were killed and thousands displaced in Upper Nile, Jonglei, Central Equatoria, Warab, and Abyei. Ambassador Adler says his country will keep helping South Sudan to achieve lasting peace, stability, and development. In September last year, the head of the UN mission in South Sudan, Nicholas Haysom, said subnational violence marked by cycles of cattle raiding, abductions, and revenge killings continued to devastate communities and drive humanitarian needs in the country. And we're still staying with South Sudan. The Minister of Information of the Pibor administrative area, Abraham Kilang Gigi, has accused Ethiopian armed youth from the Gambela region of involvement in Lekwangole attack. Kilang called on the Ethiopian government, especially the regional government of Gambela, to stop its citizens from participating in the ongoing violence in Pibor. He says Ethiopian armed civilians have crossed into South Sudan territory and are fighting alongside armed youth from Jonglei state. Kilang did not mention the number of the Ethiopian armed civilians he alleged to have been involved in the fight. He confirmed to local news in South Sudan that at Tuesday's attack at Lekwangole involved armed youth from the neighboring Gambela region of Ethiopia. He says the Ethiopian armed civilians have mobilized themselves and joined armed youth from Akobo in Jonglei state before confronting armed youth in Pibor. We head over to Somalia. The death toll from a double-car bomb attack in the central Somali province of Hiran has increased to 19. Witnesses said people far away from the site of the blast were wounded by flying fragments. Several houses were flattened. The district commissioner of Maher's town said his home and one of the member of parliament were the targets. The Islamist group Al-Shabaab said it carried out the attacks. The insurgents have stepped up attack recently in the recent months following an all-out offensive against them. We go to Togo, and President Faure Nasibe, who is mediating in the case of 46 Ivorian soldiers suspected of being mercenaries and detained in Mali since July, arrived in Bamako yesterday. A diplomatic official and an airport source have confirmed to AFP. The visit of the Togolese head of state was also confirmed to AFP by two other officials. No further information was given on the agenda and the reasons for their visit. The 46 Ivorian soldiers suspected of being mercenaries detained in Mali since July were sentenced on 30th December 2022 to 20 years in prison before the expiry of the ultimatum set by the West African heads of state to the Malian junta to release them. They were found guilty of attacking and plotting against the government, undermining the external security of the state, possession and carrying and transporting weapons and ammunition of war with the aim of disturbing public order through intimidation or terror at the end of two-day trial in Bamako. In his New Year's speech, Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara promised that the imprisoned soldiers will soon return to the Ivorian soil. Since July, Côte d'Ivoire has demanded the release of its soldiers, categorically denying they were there as mercenaries, claiming they were on a mission for the UN as part of the logistical support operations for the United Nations mission in Mali, that is UNMISS. On 22nd of December, a visit to Bamako by an official Ivorian delegation in the presence of the Togolese foreign minister took place in a fraternal spirit. It ended with the signing of a memorandum with the Ivorian Minister of Defense, Tene Birahima Ouattara, the brother of the head of state, stressing that the matter was on the way to resolution. And then we head over back to Somalia. The government on Wednesday began the prosecution of the Secretary General of the Somali Journalist Syndicate, SJS Abdel Ahmed Mumin, who continues to face severe restrictions since October last year. Abdallah Mumin was presented before the Banadir Regional Court in Mogadishu with his lawyers, media representatives and a dozen of journalists. Several members of the Somali Federal Parliament and civil society groups have joined the court hearing, which commenced at 11 a.m. Somali time. Mumin's defense lawyers strongly objected the case, as they clearly stated, as a political motivated with no legal basis. The lawyers urged the court to be mindful about their decision, as journalism is not a crime, and that the Ministry of Information, which brought the case, has been working to intimidate and silence Mumin and his colleagues. We head over to Equatorial Guinea, and the Vice President, Teodoro Nguema Obiang Mangue, who is also the son of the president, has accused the country's former colonial power, Spain, of interference. The allegation comes after Spain's judiciary opened an investigation into the kidnapping and torture of two Spanish nationals, Feliciano Ifa Mangue and Julio Obama Mefuman, in the West African state capital Malabo. Both were opponents of President Teodoro Obiang Nguema Basango's regime. He is now 80 years old and has been in power since 1979, which makes him the longest-serving president in Africa. The investigation, revealed on Tuesday by the Spanish daily El País and confirmed by AFP News in Madrid by judicial source, targets three relatives of President Obiang. One of the three is another of his sons, Camelo Ovono Obiang, who is the head of the Foreign Intelligence Service. That is another son of Obiang. Nicholas Obama Nchama, the Minister of National Security, and Isaac Nguema Endo, the Director General of Presidential Security. They are among the most senior security officials in the small but wealthy West African oil state. It is also one of the most closed states in the world, and it endures one of the worst, most authoritarian regimes. The three men are suspected by the Madrid court of having had four opponents forcibly returned to Spain from South Sudan in 2019. The four include two Spanish citizens of Equatorial Guinean origin. All of them were tortured, the newspaper alleges, saying it had access to Spanish police reports. And then we head over to Mali, and Security Ministry says armed men attacked a civil defense post in a rare attack near the capital on Monday, killing 5 people. Mali Security Ministry said unidentified armed individuals attacked the defense post on Monday night in the small southwest town of Markakugo, about 80 kilometers from the capital, Bamako. In a statement, the ministry said 2 members of the Civil Defense Force and 3 civilians were killed in the attack. It said Mali's security forces were taking all measures to identify and arrest the attackers and called the public to collaborate with security forces. So far, I think right now the Al-Qaeda group, ISIS, has already claimed, Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility for the 2 attacks in a statement that was authenticated by the US NGO site, which specializes in tracking radical groups that AFP News accessed on Wednesday. Now, violence in Mali's decade-long conflict with Islamist militants has been mostly in the north and center of the country, though attacks in the south are increasing. Mali has been under military rule since a coup that happened in August 2020. Mali's military government has denied working with the Wagner Group, a private Russian military company with links to the Kremlin, saying it works only with official Russian instructors. The French troops, which were helping fight Islamist militants in northern Mali since 2013, withdrew last year over concerns about Mali's work with the Wagner Group. UN experts have accused the mercenaries of gross rights abuses in countries where they operate, such as the Central African Republic, Libya, Sudan, Syria and Ukraine. A UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA, has also been in the country since 2013, but has faced difficulties since the military government came to power. We head over to Uganda, and the military has captured the leader of the Allied Democratic Forces ADF terrorist group that crossed from the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and attacked villages in Toroko district last month, the spokesperson has said. Now, the Ugandan People's Defense Forces, UPDF, spokesperson Brigadier General Felix Kulayije said that with the capture of ADF leader, all militants who had crossed into Uganda from their hideout in Ituri, Eastern Congo, to attack villages had been seized or killed. On December 13th, an estimated 40 ADF fighters crossed Semliki River and attacked villages in Bwerumule sub-county in Toroko district, which borders DRC, before UPDF repulsed them, killing 17 and capturing 15, while others were still at large or allegedly drowned in the river as they attempted to cross back. 3 civilians were killed in the crossfire. The ADF is a Ugandan Islamist militant rebel group that uses Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo as its base. It was established in 1996 and has carried out several bomb attacks inside Uganda's capital, Kampala, the most recent being in October and November last year, where at least 5 people were killed. The ADF operates in Eastern Congo, Ituri and North Kivu provinces, where Uganda deployed the Mountain Brigade in Operation Shujaa jointly with the DRC government to hunt down, fight and uproot the rebel group from all its bases. You are now up to date. A very good afternoon to you. About 14 minutes past 3 p.m. here in Nairobi. So, okay. Somali, it appears, not Somali, but Mali. Mali appears that they're still reeling from the insecurity that I guess when they removed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, you remember, 2020, it was over the issue of insecurity in Mali, and this problem now has persisted. So now the army is in control. So I don't know who we can now blame, because we would imagine if the army is in control, then they understand the security apparatus and what it should take to protect or address the issue of the insecurity in Mali, but that has not been the case. So I don't know if the idea of having these Russian mercenaries that Mali has refused to agree that indeed are in the country, they are there. They're saying they're working with the with the Russian government, but they're working with the Russian mercenaries, the Wagner group, and them they're calling them the instructors from Russia. I don't know what kind of instructors. Is it military instructors? Is it what instructors? Then instructing on what? Taekwondo or what? They are Russian. The Wagner group, the Russian mercenaries, and they have been present in Mali, and their presence there have caused a fallout between Mali and some of the European countries that had been in Mali for a while to help them in fighting the insurgency that has crippled the Sahel region. And Mali has been one of the key countries that has really suffered with this with this extremism. But also the history of Mali and how it got itself where it is today. We can trace it all back. I think there's a time a couple of weeks ago that I attempted to help us understand the origins of the conflict in Mali and why the extremist groups really found a very fertile ground in northern Mali to carry out their attacks and to start fighting with the government. Mali is over 90% Muslim country, so you wonder what is it? But a lot of the Muslims in Mali, they rather have a secular. They're not hardcore Muslim like that, if I could use that word. Okay, and so they want a more secular. As much as it's a majority Muslim country, but they want a more secular society that they can still, choose to dress a certain way. They can still go about their lives a certain way. But these groups are pushing for a more, an Islamized, I don't know. It's already a Muslim country, but a more extreme Sharia-based, country, led by religion and all that. So that has been a point of departure. So one of the key people who were leading the protest that eventually saw the removal of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was actually a renowned Muslim cleric, and for some reason he's not been very active now. So now it was hoped that things would have changed because the military has been in power. So what is not happening in Mali? These attacks are happening, and this attack that happened, Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility. As I said, Al-Qaeda is working with other sleeper cells, other smaller groups there, because their agenda is they want a radical, Islamized Mali. That is what Al-Qaeda affiliated groups they fight for, and of course they also fight Western education, and that is the same ideology that is driving Al-Shabaab in Somalia. They do not want a Western democracy. First of all, that is the one thing they fight. And when you look at a lot of these majorly Muslim countries, especially when you look at the countries in the Middle East, and a lot of these insecurities and this ideological warfare that we see, some of them are sponsored by some powers or some countries up there, because they drive their ideology. They drive their ideology, and they feel like, because we've seen how the U.S., when it targeted Iran, they want to introduce the Western democracy that is vehemently opposed in that region, in the Middle East. They have their own way of doing things, of governance, and the Western democracies look at countries, and majority of them are doing pretty well. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, the rest of them, they are very stable. They have their own democracy that I think works within the precepts of their culture and religion, because you can't, in these countries, you can't really, culture and religion is really married together, so you can't separate. And we saw how that played out when Qatar was hosting the World Cup, and they said as much as the world is coming to Qatar, but Qatar still has a responsibility to remain Qatar. We're not going to dilute our culture, we're not going to dilute our religion, we're not going to dilute our way of life to be accommodating. So because you're coming to Qatar, and as the old saying goes, when you go to Rome, you act as Romans. So you can't come here and want to change who we are, because you just can't. So you can't divorce religion from culture and how these countries are socialized. Their way of life is greatly rooted in religion and their culture. So it is what it is. Okay, so that is the one thing that some of these countries have been opposing, especially when you look at the West and the US specifically, and its agenda of wanting to introduce the Western kind of democracy in some of these countries, and how that has backfired. And the reason being, these other, wealthier and powerful Gulf countries, sometimes they do support some of this resistance, in other ways. So in Somalia, back to Somalia, the agenda and the ideology of Al-Shabaab is just rooted in two things. One, they want a Sharia law country in Somalia. They want a country that do not enjoy some liberal freedoms. They want a country that perhaps will mirror that of Saudi Arabia, with very strict religious practices. So that is what Al-Shabaab wants. And the second, Al-Shabaab is fighting the Western. Actually, there are three. So they're fighting, they want that kind of society based on deeply religious practices. The second is education. They don't want Western education. They have their own way of doing things. They don't want the Western education, which they think is haram and corrupt, and so that should be discouraged. And the other thing is the Western democracy, as I have explained. So that is the fight that Al-Shabaab has been having against the government in Somalia. And we've seen the government in Somalia elections. Every time there has been elections that were being organized, and that will be the time we've seen an increase in attacks by Al-Shabaab. They don't approve of these three things, and so that is where they find the basis to wage war against the government. In Al-Shabaab, even Boko Haram, it is the same ideology, and those are the things they're fighting for, and they're fighting against in Nigeria. In Nigeria also, a huge number of the population there is Muslim. They do have a good amount of Christians, but the majority are Muslims, but we can't entirely call it a Muslim country because they do also have a good number of Christians population in Nigeria. But for Mali, over 90%, I guess 94 plus, it is a Muslim country, but the majority of the population want to practice a more liberal Muslim kind of way, not very extreme practices like what these groups are fighting to have. And also one of the key factors that has contributed to this conflict is the division between the countries. The people from the southern part of Mali, they consider themselves the elites, perhaps who have gone to school well and all that. And the other northern part of the country, I think because of the cultural practices, they're not considered as, in fact, the Southerners consider them as a nuisance, okay? So they were marginalized and all that. So it was easier after the Algerian War in the 90s for the Tuaregs who, disappeared from there. And even after the falling off of Libya, after the fighting, after they removed Gaddafi, and Gaddafi was using the Tuaregs a lot to fight and to continue his ambitions after, he was disposed. So they didn't have another place to go. So they came back and regrouped in Mali. And that is where the insurgency, a renewed insurgency started, and a fight. And of course, it played into already these communities that were up there that had felt as though they had been marginalized, and they were suffering from inequalities and systematic marginalization. And we've said here before, a lot of these conflict-ridden countries, especially in Africa, when you look at one of the key root causes, marginalization is a key thing, inequality is a key thing. So this is something that our leadership in this continent must start looking at and seeing. If you leave one part of your country or a society or a community feeling disfranchised, and they feel they're disconnected from power, they're disconnected from how resources are being distributed, they're disconnected from opportunities, and they feel like they're not being treated fairly, then you're creating a very rife ground where anybody can speak into this disillusionment, and before you know it, something has morphed up. And that is the case with Mali. That is the case, and we've explained here before, in northern part of Mozambique, Cabo Delgado. The community there, well, these multinational companies came and set a shop, like Total Oil and others. That area is one with the richest amount of minerals in Mozambique, and also one of the poorest. So the community and the community that lived around these areas were removed, and they were not offered alternative. And they are seeing their wealth, other people benefiting, and nobody is, and they're not benefiting. They still remain poor, even for those who are still living within that region. They still remain poor, and yet they see the wealth being taken from this place and other being flown out of the country, and the rest is being distributed by a few people in central government. So what happens? An Al-Shabaab, they also have an Al-Shabaab there. It's easier to play into their hands, because these are people who feel that the government is being unfair to them. So if another group comes and tells them, now let's fight this government so that you get what is rightfully yours, tell me how they will refuse that offer. They have nothing to lose after all, because they feel like the government has neglected them. So this is a key reason, or a key driving factor in all these conflicts that you see in the different African countries, and that is not different from what is happening in Mali. So Mali, we do have a United Nations peacekeeping mission there. MINUSMA has been there since 2013. That has not helped anything. These peacekeeping missions, and they're very expensive to even maintain in these countries. Can you imagine? In the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have a whole, actually it's 18,000, but 16,000 are combat, 16,000 are soldiers, 16,000 and some change, and then the rest are other, perhaps drivers and cooks and doctors and all these things. A huge number of staff from the United Nations, 18,000. And still, we don't have peace. So you wonder, what is the purpose? Why are we funding these expensive missions, and at the end of the day, they don't even protect the civilians in this country? Like, we've seen that play out in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where even the citizens had to start fighting these peacekeeping missions, because they are not offering the protection that they're supposed to be offering. They're supposed to be protecting the lives of the people, these peacekeeping missions, and they failed doing that. They've failed doing that in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've seen them fail doing that in South Sudan, where South Sudanese have turned and started fighting them. You'll find that the citizens are being attacked, or the civilians, they're being attacked in areas very close proximity with where these missions are situated. This peacekeeping MINUSMA is situated, and yet they're not able to be protected. So you wonder, what really is the mandate of this peacekeeping mission, or is it just one of those things that UN spent so much money on, but we can't see really returns to this? So the Wagner Group, I think, the Wagner Group caused a rift after it went into Mali, and Mali was one of the key members of the G5, the G5 of the Sahel that I think France had set up, these countries, and they had the G5 to help in the fight against this insurgency. But since Mali removed itself from this group, things had not been quite well, and so I don't know why the attacks are increasing, but something is amiss there. In Mali, well, the story of Equatorial Guinea, the vice president, Teodoro, who is the son of the president, was accused by the former colony, that is colonial power, that is Spain, of torturing some, opposition leaders. I'm not surprised. That has been the case. That has been the case. His father just won, they had the elections in November, but that was just a formality. And the father has been in power for 43 years, and he won another term, and a term is about 7 years there. So he, and he's 87. Is he 87 or 89? No, he's 80 years old. He's 80, and he's been in power since 1979. He removed his uncle from power through a coup in 1979, and he's remained in power since then, and he's the longest serving head of state in Africa. So the son is the vice president, and also one of his other son is he also has another very key post in his father's government. Yesterday, we attempted to look. We didn't fully look at that topic, but that was what we were meant to be looking at. And we were looking at the political dynasties, the politics of favoritism and all that. But, political dynasties. And in Africa, you'll be surprised. There are countries, a good number of them, that we've seen a power just rotate within a family. And there are like about 6 or so countries where power has strictly come from a father to the son, from a father. I don't know what happens to their daughters. Well, Isabella Santos almost became, perhaps inherited that seat from her father, but that did not happen. But anyway, it is from a father to the son, from a father to the son. A country like Togo. Let me just see if I could find that information. We had that conversation here yesterday. So it's very interesting. Togo. The current president, Faure Nasibe, came to power in 2005. Before assuming the presidency, he was appointed by his father, President Nasibe Eyadema, as Minister of Equipment. Minister of Equipment? What kind of ministry is that? As Minister of Equipment, Mines, Post, and Telecommunications. Minister of Equipment. Do you understand? Of all the ministries that we need in this continent, we have a Minister of Equipment, and he served in that ministry from 2003 to 2005. And then Nasibe Eyadema died, and he had been president since 1967. And so because he suddenly died, and according to the Togolese constitution, after the president's death, the president of the National Assembly should have become the acting president. And at the time of Eyadema's death, National Assembly's president, Fambare Ouattara, was out of the country, and so Nasibe was sworn in as an acting president to ensure stability, the son. So they could not wait for the speaker to come. So they swore in his son. And many believe that this speaker did not come back to Togo due to fears of assassination by the Nasibe's clan. And the army wanted him to resign his position to allow the son to take over anyway. And then Equatorial Guinea, the one I was just explaining, the one I was talking to you about. And in Uganda, we can see that Mhonzi right now can't wait for his father to, die or just leave. The father won't leave. So, but you can see his hands are just, he can't wait to be the president of Uganda from the tweets and how he's been expressing himself, And, sometimes, I don't know, there's a conversation I was having with some friends a while back, and, this is a person who can even remove his dad. There's a time he tweeted a very telling tweet about the old guard and it's time for new blood in Uganda. And then you wonder, dude, your father is the old blood, so I don't know how you're planning to remove that. But anyway, we've seen that he's been groomed to take over. I think it's no secret now after his father. And then we saw what happened in Chad after Idris Deby died and his son Muhammad Deby, came into power. Okay, and his father had been president in Chad for 30 years. And then we have Gabon, Ali Bongo, who is the third president of Gabon since 2009, after his father Omar Bongo died. And his father Omar Bongo had been the president from 1967, basically since these countries got their independence. And so it has been a political dynasty in a few of these countries across Africa. So that has been the case. So anyway, Teodoro now, they're looking for him. The Spain authorities, the vice president, they're looking for him because of the torture and the abuses that he carried out against some opposition heads there in Equatorial Guinea. Now the issue, all right, an alarming story as I was reading through the insecurity in South Sudan. We are there anyway. So there are apparently, from what the Minister of Information for the Pibor administrative area, Abraham Kelang, saying that there are some Ethiopian armed youth from the Gambele region who are involved in this attack in an area known as Lekwo Ngole. You know, right now there's been a renewed conflict, and I really don't want to delve so much into this because I think it requires a whole hour or a whole show to look at. So I'll just gloss over it. But they're saying there are some youth that are coming from Ethiopia, and they are involved in this communal violence that has been ongoing, that I think is ethnically motivated between certain communities, but I'll not have that conversation today. As I said, it requires a lot of understanding for us to really put everything into context. We have to understand the historical context of it all that has set up South Sudan for these kinds of conflicts that we've seen that has refused to go away. And, you know, the U.S. has reiterated its commitment in supporting the peace process in South Sudan. And, of course, they're raising concerns over this renewed communal violence, you know, so they're saying that what is happening there is not okay. But also what really got me surprised is what the governor for Jonglei state said, where this is like the hotbed of this communal violence, the ongoing communal violence, and he's saying he went to a national television in South Sudan. There's only one media house owned by the government because of this conflicts and this instability that has been ongoing in South Sudan. There's not been any investors who have the nerve to come and invest in such a place because you can't. You know, stability is one of the key things that investors look at when they want to put their money somewhere. So that has not been viable. So we only have state-run media. So he went to this state media, this governor for Jonglei, and he said that he threatened to name people fueling the violence. Why are you threatening to name people who are fueling the violence? Meaning, you all know, and that is what I was saying here yesterday, the leadership in South Sudan knows the people who are fueling this violence. So why are we not taking any action? Why are we not taking any action? Why are we threatening to name the people who are fueling violence? Why haven't we not have the relevant institutions going and perhaps interrogating these people and investigating or just trying to find a solution? Why? Why are you sitting down in a national television, you governor, and threaten to name the people who are fueling this conflict while we have thousands of people being affected? We have mothers and children, men and everybody being affected. Did you not see this? The statistics that you are receiving from the United Nations, the number of people who have died, the internally displaced people, the people who are leaving their homes, the people who what? These are not just statistics that you're looking at. These are people that are being affected. And if you know these people and you have the audacity to go sit at a national broadcasting media house and you threaten to name these people, and yet there are people who are suffering, who have been affected from this conflict, but you won't do anything. And after saying that, the government should not have left you walk out. In fact, you should have finished that interview. Somebody was supposed to be at the door waiting for you so that you can give that information to the relevant authorities so that investigations can be done and those people who are responsible could be apprehended. But anyway, it sounds like an ideal thing to say. But we have to remember also that South Sudan is, because of how it is and the war that broke up 2 years after it received its independence, they don't have really institutions there. Well, they do have institutions. They don't have strong institutions. And these institutions are run in a way that sometimes they're run like private or personal enterprise. So that statement should have been probed further. this governor, he needs to avail this information to the relevant authorities. President Salva Kiir, your administration needs to take action so that he can give this information, perhaps give these names to the people who could help in taking action. Because you cannot be complacent like that. Because if somebody comes out at a national television station with this kind of an information, then no action is taken, no further probe is taken. Your government is being complacent in the suffering of the people of South Sudan. Well, I'm not surprised, because that is what we've been seeing happening. But that will be a good chance for you to show commitment of protecting the lives of the people of South Sudan, and wanting even to hold people accountable over this madness that has been ongoing in South Sudan. I know the history goes a bit farther, but that also has been filled further with the political instability. So the political instability just played right into the hands of the ethnic balkanization that had existed even years back. Even before they got their independence from Sudan, there had been some history of that. As I said, I'll get a show where we'll look at that and see where the rain started beating South Sudan. But you must show your commitment. Get the information from this governor of Jonglei. His name is Chagor. Let Chagor give you the information he has, the names of the people, because he threatened to name the people who are feeling this violence between the youth and the state and the neighboring Pibor administrative area. You know, South Sudan has, they inherited 10 states after, you know, they became a country from Sudan. And then because of ethnicity and politics, they kept increasing these states. So by 2017, I guess they had about 32 states from 10. And then there was, after the signing of the revitalized peace agreement, there was a conversation again about revising the number of states. So after back and forth, it was a tedious process. They went back to 10 states, but also outside of just having the 10 states, they had 2 administrative areas, and one of them is Pibor. So they sort of have some raised status compared to the other 10 states, I believe. So now, a lot of it, they thought maybe by increasing the number of states, it will address the issue of boundaries, because they've been fighting over pastures and natural resources, and ethnicity, as I said, is a huge factor in this conflict. And of course, politics has taken advantage of that, and politicians have taken advantage of that, and now they're running their agendas through these existing problems that were there to continue fueling this conflict. And now we see long time, it wasn't as bad, because then they're only fighting about pasture and things like that, and boundaries. But when now they were broke, and now a lot of them could find themselves with arms, that became a problem. And that's why you see it's very difficult to manage this conflict as it is right now. And what we've seen, been playing out, in other factors also that have worked to help in this, in fueling this conflict. But I'm saying all this to say, this person, the government is to take that information that he has that can help in investigation, so that these people who are responsible can be held accountable. Otherwise, why are you in power? What are you doing, President Salva Kiir? Why is your government acting as if it's complacent in the suffering of its people? There has to be something that you can do, surely. It can't be all that helplessness. There has to be something that the government, the central government, the government of the Republic of South Sudan under you, President Salva Kiir, can do to ease out the suffering and the pain these people, your people, are going through there. So hopefully this year you will commit to that. At least you will commit to that as the head of state and your government. Okay? All right. So that is all we had time for this afternoon. I want to thank you so much for your time. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. I'll see you again here tomorrow, God willing. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.